Welcome to a special meeting of the Board of School Directors, Monday, June 6th. We'll have two meetings scheduled tonight. 6:30 to 8 will be our open work session, similar to what we did in the month of May, to discuss enrollment and facilities. And then following that, we'll have what has been an added education supplementary meeting that will focus primarily on the strategic plan. So thank you for being here, and I'll turn the meeting over to Mr. Copeland.
Sorry, I lost my mouse. There we go.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. This is the second in what I imagine will be a series of meetings where the board is having a public work session after it had an informational meeting. This evening's public work session will be our charge that the administration was given to answer some of the questions that came from the board at the last presentation and also from the public that we got through community comments and the email procedure that we set forth. So this is really an attempt to answer some questions. This is not a finality. This is just second in a series of what I think are going to be ongoing discussions about our enrollment and our enrollment growth and the impact it has on our facilities. One of the questions that was, and so this is what I'm going to try and do. I'm going to try not to go too quickly, but at the same time, I want to go quickly enough so that we leave time for board and public comments or questions at the end. And this is a fairly robust presentation. One of the questions that came up was, are there advantages or disadvantages to larger or smaller elementary schools? There's not a terribly large body of research on this. We had our special assistant for program evaluation do basically a white paper search on it. Mixed results. Largely, if you ask, there are very few research projects that are done on the size of elementary schools. Most of them have been done on the size of high schools. Some say the optimal size is as low as 400, but there's certainly no definitive causal relationship that we've been able to find. Comparisons of core space facility, we asked about that. Generally speaking, these are the areas that we're concerned about. When you have enrollment growth and you're looking to build onto schools, people will inevitably say, well, you just add classrooms. Well, if you just add classrooms and you don't concern yourself with the core space, then things like physical education, assembly space, cafeteria, and a large group instructional space, library, art, music, etc., you can find yourself quickly becoming overwhelmed. These are the areas. If we look at the highest projected enrollment for each of the 6 elementary schools, these are the areas in each one of those schools that we find are most at risk. In Belmont Hills, music, Kinwood and LGI in music, and so forth. And you can see in both Penn Valley and Penn Wynne, we're concerned about a number of core facilities should the highest projected enrollment continue in that direction. Another way to look at the facilities was to take a look at the facilities broken down by the number of students. I'm going to ask Mr. Ganan, who put this together, to come up. We're sort of going to be doing this together a little bit, and let him give you the methodology that he put into that. Pat?
Well, the idea here was to take a look at the actual sites. In other words, how big is the property and how is it broken up, and we actually took that information and divided it by the number of students at the highest projected enrollment. That was a way to kind of normalize the data so that you could compare it over the 6 elementary schools. So the first thing we did was look at the total site of acres per student, and what I've done in each one of these columns is highlight in red the 2 lowest values. So it's probably no surprise that Kinwood has the lowest size per student, and then the second there is Penn Wynne. The next column looks at soft surface playground, and my definition for that is this is where you find the swings and the monkey bars, and you have safety mulch underneath it. So we took a look at that, and again, you see Kinwood and Penn Wynne at the bottom. We looked at hard surface play area, where you actually have a paved area for play, and you can see the results there. And then we looked at green space playground. In other words, playground that's not hard surface, playground that's not soft surface, but playground that's grass that's available for recess. And you can see the results there.
Thank you. Don't go too far. One of the questions was, do we have cost estimates for the space? And we're beginning to put plans for Penn Win to do that, Gladwin and others. So we're not there yet. We looked at the new elementary school. We talked about that, I think, for the first time last time. The enrollment, if there was a 7th elementary school located in and around the environs of Welsh Valley Middle School, would hold no more than 550 students. The question was, may that still require some building? We'll talk about that in a second. One of the things we know it would require would be a significant amount of redistricting throughout the district. The cost is about $44 million. Much of that has to do with the fact that we probably have to do underground parking. It might solve some of the overcrowding problems at Ballackinwood, because given its proximity to Welsh Valley, those students would most likely go to Welsh Valley, but it might cause additional problems at Welsh Valley Middle School. The biggest advantage it has from a planning aspect is you do less hoping, you have more control. You redistrict as close to the time of opening the school as you possibly can, so you can make the best decisions that you can. This is a map which shows the existing elementary school boundaries, and you can see that there is a lot of students. Everywhere there's a dot, there's at least one student. And you can see the concentration of students. One of the questions that we were asked was, board asked, how many students were in this Penn Win attendance area? There are 79, and in the Penn Valley attendance area, 249 in that little area. I was trying to come up with a geometric shape for it. I didn't do well. Will we still have to build at some elementary schools? Well, it depends on the effect of the feeder pattern at the middle schools. It's going to require looking to future projections. 4 of the 6 elementary schools have projected peak in 2019-20. But if you look at this chart, you can see that every year going forward, the highest projected enrollment goes up to 213. So theoretically, an elementary school that holds 550 should take care of not having to build onto any elementary schools if you built a 7th elementary school and made sure that the redistricting took that into account. So that answers that. Will we have to do it? The answer is no, not if redistricting is done in a manner to sufficiently reduce enrollment at each school. The effect on the feeder patterns at the middle school depends on the redistricting. You know, do you just move it the way it is, or do you shift those significantly? Certainly, we think it would require more space at Welsh Valley. We had a handout. I think, you know what, we're gonna add that handout to the it's a very detailed spreadsheet, and we'll make sure that that's on the website along with this. Okay. So when we looked at, I should stop here and say, one of the things that we've done since this time is we've really spent a lot of time with our building principals and to really look at the programs and to make sure that we've taken things into consideration. At the middle schools, the areas of concern at the highest projected enrollment at Ballackinwood and Welsh Valley are those areas. And so what we asked one of the things that we did was we went back to the middle schools and said, okay, by projecting numbers, we think we can fit the number of students who will be going into those schools, but we want to make sure programmatically this works. So we sat down with the principals and went through it programmatically, and we found that we really do have to, if we did nothing, no new construction, no new building, not a new elementary school at all, we still have core facility issues at the 2 middle schools. And we have our architects here this evening who will show you, by no means a final plan, just some basic concepts about what we would have to do in the schools if we were going to, what we think we would have to do no matter what. You want to introduce?
Right, this is Mr. Tom Gilbert of Gilbert Architects.
So how we go forward?
Just use the down arrow. So you got the first one. That's the launch.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. So on this, you're all looking up here. Okay. So in the, as Mr. Copeland said, we met with all the principals, talked about the core spaces, what it would take to meet the highest projected enrollments. Some of that requires additional classroom space and different support space. So on the upper left-hand corner, we looked at putting modulars onto Bala Cynwyd. That would have 4 classrooms, an art room, and a music room. And we were looking at repurposing some of the core space in the center where it's green and purple and yellow to repurpose those into computer room and classrooms. With this, we still need to increase the cafeteria size and the serving kitchen size. So on the bottom left-hand corner, right above basement floor, is an addition onto the cafeteria. Then the other option that we looked at is if we did it with permanent construction instead of modular construction, where would we add on to that? So that would be on the upper left-hand corner, basically adding on to the new storage room that we built last year with 2 classrooms, an art room, toilet rooms connected into the main corridor on the first floor, and then the same on the second floor, 2 classrooms, a music room, toilet rooms, and so forth. Now at Welsh Valley, we first looked at putting in modular classrooms. So we need 6 modular classrooms, basically where the modulars were that were just recently removed. We looked at how to add on to this, and on the lower level, on the bottom, on the right, adding on 2 classrooms on this level, as well as 2 classrooms on the next level. And up at the top in the middle, we wanted to add a new art room, and we also needed to expand the cafeteria kitchen area, which is in the center in the tan color. We were going to take over the faculty room and add on to that space as well. And then in the upper middle, where it's green and hatched, we were going to add a new art room in order to meet all their core space requirements. So.
So, other questions surrounding Penn Wynn, temporary classrooms, Williamson Road property, and to clarify some high school capacities. We took a look at the temporary classrooms again, have a different plan for the basin relocation. Mr. Damian Spar, you want to?
Good evening. Some time ago, we started talking about where we were going to put a basin, given the idea that we were going to build permanent construction on the west side of Penn Wynn. And at that time, when we consider basins, we considered them all over the place. And as somebody that I think many of you have known me for almost 4 years now, I'm always looking at most cost-effective, least disruptive. So in that, between what the engineer was thinking and what I was thinking, we had ruled out lots of locations, including the parking lot, and I informed Mr. Copeland of that some time ago, which he took my advice and shared that with the board, shared that with the public. And a lawyer friend of mine one time told me that an answer always has to start with "it depends." And in this case, the "it depends" is it depends on whether or not green space is more important than everything else in the site. And when we take that as our leading factor, we start to look at what way, and if at all, can we get under the parking lot. The one thing that we had going for us is that the parking lot area, the area under the parking lot perks well, which is similar to the rest of the site, but the site where we located the basin, where it was originally designed, does not perk well. So while there would be an added cost normally to going to this parking lot location, which is something that I've always tried to avoid, because of the bad percolation in the spot that we've designed to, the net cost really is not going to be any different than what we've talked about really in the last month or so for the district. So with some thoughtful design and some recanting, and I hope you'll forgive me on my part for why we didn't originally look here and why we will go there now, we have found a way to be under that parking lot with this design, and we will be asking the facilities committee and the board to allow us to proceed with that so that we can stay on track, knowing that we're going to be in a pretty similar cost area. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Not yet. We got like 40,000 slides to go through here. The other question was property on Williamson Road. You can see where that property is. It's actually come off the sales. One of the difficulties there is its distance from the majority of the students. Third question was it seems like the high school building capacity numbers had changed. And Pat, you want to talk about that?
Right, basically the capacity was assigned, this goes back to the facilities capacity study done and finalized last November. It was assigned based on how the school is using the classrooms. The two high schools are virtually identical. They have the same number of classroom size spaces. But it turns out that Harriton is using some of those spaces for special education, which doesn't get credit per PDE. I mean, it's considered separately. So that's why when you looked at the results, it looked like there was more capacity at Lower Merion than there was at Harriton. In fact, they have the same number of classrooms.
Okay. Somebody asked me, now I should say, I've had one question from the public and one question from the board about could you put the 5th grade into the middle schools? I shuddered and broke out into a cold sweat because we did that in my last district, and I was, so, you know, please. But the answer is, yeah, you can, and you know, Upper Merion has a 5 through 8, TE has 5 through 8s. I've been in a number of districts that have 5 through 8s. But, so here are some basics with it. It would relieve pressure on the elementary schools by converting to K4. Moving the kindergarten out only takes half the classrooms. Whereas if you move the 5th grade out, you get a much more relief inside the building. It does allow you to keep the current neighborhood schools in place. One of the problems is it's fairly expensive, and the site is not easy to work on. Ballackinwood's not an easy site to work on, so the expansion would be pretty significant. But you could do it. Another one was redistricting without a new school, just redistrict Penn Win and build on to every other school. And I'll show you some summaries. So I'm actually getting through this much faster than I actually anticipated. So the neighborhood stabilization. The positives, it keeps the current school communities intact, and you can do a planned rollout. You can really see where you're going. Interestingly enough, the enrollment patterns in Lower Merion don't seem to be consistent from what the staff tells me years past. So right now, we're actually experiencing a lower than expected registration. Now again, people have said to me, but when that happens, you can get a big bump during the summer. Sometimes during the spring, you get a lot of kids coming in and then there's a fall off. So there's no pattern in the community, but this allows you to sort of plan for it a little bit. The challenges, you get larger elementary schools, and we have to worry about impervious surface in all of those buildings. The seventh, or the new elementary school, the positive, puts the most control over future enrollment. It reduces the need for construction on other schools. The challenges, significant redistricting. It puts additional pressure on Welsh Valley. It might curtail some of the issues at Bala-Cynwyd. There is a lack of parking, resulting in probably an underground parking situation. The 5 through 8 building, the positives, it keeps the current elementary boundaries. You do get a planned rollout. The challenges, middle school becomes basic, our middle schools become basically as large as our high schools. Both schools have some site challenges. The cost of construction is high. Redistricting students from Penn Win, well, the positives, Marion has easier building footprint, but challenges, traffic and parking at Marion and Penn Win would be adversely impacted as in Penn Valley rather. It does not relieve increases at Gladwin, Belmont Hills, or Kinwood, and so there would be a need to increase core spaces, probably, and you would get, again, larger elementary schools. One thing that I did want people to at least take a look at is some possibilities using modulars for longer than just construction. So make believe, if you will, Bala-Cynwyd needs 6 classrooms. Actually, you don't have to make believe. We may need 6 classes. The modular cost is $2 million for 5 years. So that's, what, $400,000 a year. The construction is $6 million. Assuming you went out to borrow the money, the cost of debt service is $400,000 a year, but for 20 years. My concern with anything we do is that every $10 million that we borrow is about, Mr. Orlando, $750,000 in debt service. So that means that your mortgage payment, in essence, increases $750,000. And because there's no exemption from that with the Act 1, that would have to come out of the Act 1 index, which means there's a chance it cuts into programs. So a summary, you can see where the costs are, which is the largest, which is the cheapest, and I know that costing out was one of the things that the board had asked us to take a look at. So 30 minutes.
Well, you haven't had questions yet, though. Oh, Pat, you have something?
Right, this is just an administrative announcement. We were just informed it started sprinkling outside, so if you're the one with the convertible outside, you may want to go outside. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, particularly looking at some of these issues, K-12. I know that was something that had come up when we the board first started deliberating in facilities and then in business meetings around Penn Win in particular, given the constraining facilities there. So a huge thank you to Mr. Copeland and our team. I'd like to open up for questions from the board first, and then for public comment. Again, we will, we have until 8 o'clock, right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right, so let me open up to the board first, and then we will open up for the rest of the public to ask questions and for us to have a conversation. Dr. Gilbert?
Yeah, I just have some clarification questions first. So in terms of the middle school expansion, can you put the summary of options up on the, do you mind doing that? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think it's the previous slide.
This one here.
Yeah. So the summary, the middle school expansion, and I know you went over this, so I apologize, it's just it was quickly. Like, how many classrooms do we need at Welsh Valley and how many at Bala-Cynwyd are we estimating?
So there are, that's a good question. There are right now 15 fifth grade classrooms right now today.
At both?
Both.
Okay, so.
Well, no, at all of our elementary schools.
I was like, wow, that's really big. Thank
At
you.
at all of
Okay.
our elementary schools, there's 15 fifth
All
grade
right.
classrooms.
I feel better now. Okay.
Excuse me? There's 30. Oh, there would be 15 in each if we
There's
went to it,
15
yeah.
in each.
So
Okay,
there's 30
so-
now. The plan would be to build 40. Now, you could argue, you could probably value engineer that down some. But that's not really going to save
Wait,
you a
wait.
whole heck of a lot of money.
You're gonna build an additional, how many?
20.
20. Sorry, I told you it was pretty basic. Okay, and then that's gonna need to happen regardless of what happens at the elementary schools, right?
No.
This is- No.
So if we, regardless as to what happens in the elementary schools, and I'm looking at Mr. Gannon here, regardless of what happens in the elementary schools, there's about $14 million of core space expansion that we believe is going to be necessary if we're going to maintain our current level of programming.
Okay, so-
That part of it, no matter what.
Right, that part is no matter what. So does this figure, the 14 million, does that include just the core facility?
Yes.
Or does that also include additional classrooms?
Well, it includes some additional classrooms, but not to handle the fifth grade, just to
But not to,
provide.
no, I understand, because
Okay.
5 through 8 is a different
Yeah, okay.
category. Okay, I understand that. So we're gonna have to do something related to the middle school core expansion no matter what.
In talking with the principals, we've become convinced that in order to deliver the program in the way we're delivering it now, with same high quality, we're going to need some extra classrooms, yes.
Okay. I forgot my second question, so somebody else
happy
can go and
about
I'll come
that.
back.
Okay, please, Ms. Acme.
Sorry, I have a question. So this strategy made me think of another question, which is, if, in parallel to considering moving fifth grade to the middle schools, should you consider moving eighth grade to the high schools? And I'm sure the answer is probably no, because we don't have capacity at Lower Merion, but anyway, I just,
So, you know, there are junior, senior highs. All of those, I mean, one of the things that I get asked a lot is, what's the best educational organization?
right.
And I really hesitate to get into that, because I've seen really great schools with a variety of different organizations, 712s, you know, these decisions are often made around balancing community interests with enrollment needs. So could you do it? Sure, you could do it. I think that there are some practical issues we'd have to think about by just sort of moving them up. One of them would mean you've got now 5 grades in every high school as opposed to 4.
Yeah, right. No, sure. But I would, I just. was
You know, one
thinking
of the things that
cascading kids
one of the things
up.
we do anytime we shift enrollment is you say, okay, now that we've done this, what are some things we can do differently to enhance the program?
Right.
So obviously, you bring your high school program to kids sooner, but
Right.
I'm not sure that fits into where the community would feel
Sure.
comfortable.
Yeah, and, right. I don't know if the shifting the fifth grade up is, anyway. Okay, thank you for the moment.
Dr. O'Leary?
So, if I understand correctly, we need 237 elementary school seats, or sorry, 213 elementary schools.
At the highest
at the
projected
highest
enrollment, I
projected.
believe you're right, yes.
So if we had a grade 4 through 7 magnet program in the new building, we could take 213 elementary students and 237 middle school students and use the new facility and lessen the burden on all of the elementaries and both of the middles, correct?
If they would come out of the schools that you need them to come out of.
Okay.
So in other words,
Well, we get to pick them, right? So,
okay.
I mean, they're fairly, well, no, I don't know what the program would be, and I don't know if people would be interested, and I don't know if it would be a lottery, I don't know if it would be something that, we haven't even discussed at all what that would look like. So we could design a program. I'm not suggesting ripping people out of their neighborhood schools and putting there, so,
Mathematically,
Don't need
to
those
answer your
details.
question, certainly.
yeah.
Again, one of the challenges, you know, relatively speaking, we're a medium-sized, you know, district, and that puts a strain. If you're a very large district, you get to do some things differently.
Please.
I have a number of questions, but just to build on Maureen's concept. Later on today, we're going to have a presentation on the strategic plan, which includes looking at how we deliver education differently and some other sort of innovative ideas that we're hoping to look at. And I just wonder if this is something we could investigate if we were to do something like this. And it may be cost prohibitive, there may be too many impossibilities to it. But if we just looked at, if we were to do something like Maureen suggests, what would it look like? How would we formulate it? I think it'd be worth, you know, a couple hours of some people talking about it to maybe see if it inspires some ideas. But just to add some support to the, at least looking at it. Regarding my questions, most of them are pretty easy to answer, like fact questions. You said the new elementary school is finite at 550. Is that because of that site?
Yes.
Okay. Pat, on the slide with the site comparisons, yeah, it's early on in the presentation. You have acres per students and green space per student on there. Yeah, it's real. Yeah, that's real early. There we go. The acres per student, is that the total acreage, including the building footprint and everything?
Yes, that's the entire site.
Okay, so, you know, the buildings are, some are more sprawling, some are taller, so.
Correct.
You didn't subtract that out.
Correct.
So,
What I did to designate the other playground areas is I took a site plan and based on my own knowledge of how the schools are set up, I basically shaded in different areas. This is green space, this is soft, this is hard. I gave it to our intern who then produced the numbers.
okay, so like the green space at Penn Win, that would include the green space in the back, but not the green space in the front.
I think right, that's all I counted, because the green space in the front is not really playground.
And the green space at Gladwin is only that field in the back and not any other, like there's a hill that's now part of ours. It's in the, I guess you'd call the front of the school.
Yes.
Which is green space that belongs to the site, but is not play space.
Correct.
So, okay. So that green space is only the space that the kids use currently?
Correct.
Okay, thanks. Bob, if enrollment were to fall, elementary enrollment were to fall, can we survive in our existing space?
If enrollment were to fall,
Yeah. Like you know, let's say it holds for a year, or drops for a year, and then continues to fall, or holds. Are we? I mean, we're not ideal, but we can continue.
I think that's a fair statement.
We don't have like a pressing.
We've got, well, Penn Win, I think we'll need the modulars if we hold. If we were to go down,
Yeah.
if it were to go down, I guess we'd be okay.
But we
Okay.
don't know how much. I mean, that's, I'm sorry. I'm not clear when we say if it were to fall, what number are you talking about, Diane? By 100 kids, 50 kids? I mean, I would like, I mean, if we're gonna talk about that, I want more clarification.
5 kids next year, and then another 5 kids the year after. I don't know. I'm just.
Well,
I'm
one
just
of the-
thinking. Just asking a question. That's all.
One of the things that I'd asked and thanked the board for a couple of months ago was to consider not moving ahead with the building at Penn Win so that we could do 2 things. One, have opportunities like this to have more discussion and more planning, and 2, to see where we would be with some of the adjustments we've already made. The board's developed a policy of partner schooling. And that due date has ended. It's June 1st. So anybody who's in the queue, we know who they are at this point. We have a pretty good idea of the numbers of families who are moving out. And what this has really allowed the elementary principals to do is to really have some sense of assurity as they're moving forward this summer. And right now, everything looks like it's going to fit based on that. Now, it'll be interesting to see what happens during the course of the summer as people move in, people move out, and people get assigned to that which may not be their neighborhood school.
Okay. Do we know when the enrollment projection, the maximum enrollment projection is for the middle schools? So you have it here for the elementary schools. And
I do not have that.
Yeah.
I don't know if
And-
Pat has it.
Yeah, I mean, my back of the envelope has both middle schools increasing enrollment the next 2 years, but then maybe going down. But I mean, that's just,
The highest projected enrollment based on our last enrollment projection update for the middle schools, each of them, is 2022-23.
okay. So that's way
But-
down the road.
Right now, we are concerned about what happens at Ballackinwood.
Yeah, no.
Not next year, but the year after.
I mean, if you just do something as simple as, so, look at the number of eighth graders leaving the middle schools and the number of fifth graders moving in, you've already got a net increase of 75
Yeah.
with no movement at all, other than from fifth to, fifth in and eighth out. So, I mean, they're definitely growing. It's just a question of what the projection would be.
Our recommendation is to wait and see what happens on the 10th day enrollment in terms of elementary, and we very well may be coming back to look at some temporary solutions for Ballackinwood next fall.
And then my last question, actually dovetails quite nicely with one of your last slides, which was the one on the modular example. We have a number of possibilities in terms of what we might have to do here, what we might have to do there, and we're looking at cost comparisons, but we're looking at total cost comparisons. And when we did some of the previous projects, we did value engineering, so we looked at what was the cost over 10 years. So if we have, for example, if we looked at your modular example, and, Ballackinwood needs 6 classes, the modular cost is $2 million for 5 years, the construction 6, that's $400,000 a year for 20 years. That's the kind of thing I'm interested in seeing for some of the other options that we're looking at. So, for example, the elementary schools, the projections have, I think, based on the projections, the peak enrollment is coming up pretty soon. And, can we look at like a modular solution over time to see whether, modulars for 5 years is a more cost-effective solution than building new and then paying it over 20? Is there a way to take a look at that?
There's always, it's kind of like almost anything. When do you buy the car? When do you lease the car? How many miles? And the difference between a car and school enrollment is you can make some personal decisions about what your habits will be. It's a bit of a gamble. You invest in the modulars, you invest in them somewhat long-term, then all of a sudden you find out that, what we really should have built, and then you find out you've wasted some money in that. The converse is we build, and for some reason they stop coming, and all of a sudden you've got the facilities. I've always advised boards, when you think you know what you're going to do, you build a little bit more, to make sure that you've got room to grow, and then you look at what would happen if that growth reversed itself. So at the elementary level, one of the advantages is, let's suppose, for some reason, after the highest projected enrollment, the construction was done, and for some unbeknownst reason, the enrollment plummets. People have asked for things like full-day kindergarten. That gives you an opportunity to do that when you wouldn't have had the opportunity in the past.
Yeah, I just think it's another piece of information that goes into the thought process, and this district went through exactly what you're discussing long before I was on the board. You know, back in the late 70s, early 80s, this was exactly the kind of thing that the issue that came up, and part of it requires a crystal ball, which none of us have. But I just, for me personally, the more information of that sort that I can take into my thought process, I think the better the decision I can make.
While we're discussing, one of the things I'm going to ask Mr. Gannon to do, because I looked at it today, but I didn't commit it to memory. In the estimate of the report by the demographers, they gave some examples of what they thought were going to come out of some new housing. And we've got some experience from those. Do you remember, Pat, or can you look up in a few seconds what they estimated at, say, the Palmer, and what we're actually getting out of the Palmer?
Well, while he's doing that, can I just follow up on the issue? Because when we built at Gladwin, recently, when we did the Gladwin and Penn Valley, we looked at the temporaries versus permanent. We had a big discussion about that. So that would be sort of consistent with how we've been evaluating throughout. So I agree that's information that would be useful. And I also, we've been doing this now for quite some while around managing the growth, and I think it's important for people who may just be tuning in to understand the amount of sort of reorganizing the way we've been using space for quite some time, starting with people whose kids now are in probably high school, or maybe even beyond that, will remember that MELC was in all of the elementary schools. And it was a really big deal to sort of kick MELC out of the elementary schools when we needed to do that. And this has been going on now for years. And so I think that I just want people to understand that there isn't a lot more we can do in terms of making the existing space work for us programmatically. I mean, we have been doing that. So I just wanted to make that point while we were waiting for.
Please.
Thanks for the presentation. I'm going to ask a question that's going to jump on Maureen's point of creating a magnet school. Diane wants to look at, which is fine, but we will need bus information, because the way I understood it, if it is a 4 to 7, that sounds to me like it's a fourth tier of busing. Because if you have a fourth grader living next door to each other, one goes to the, quote, local elementary school, the other one would have to go to the magnet school, and in some instances that's 3-4 miles away, depending on where they live. So unless I'm hearing it wrong, something like that would require additional bus capacity than I think we have today.
Right. The concept of a magnet school is a legitimate, tried and true process for balancing enrollment growth. But it goes to the issue of, I think, we look at this as a formula for the right answer for what to do. Sure. And I would also argue that there's multiple things you can do. The response doesn't have to be all or anything. It could be a combination. But you're right, there are logistical things. Mr. Gannon, what did you find?
Okay, I'm referring back to page 34 in the Montgomery County Planning Commission enrollment projection report published in April of last year. And for the Palmer Seminary, they're predicting 3 students next year, 3 students the year after. I had transportation do some updating today, and this is raw data, so it really hasn't had a chance to be verified, but as of today, there are 14 students living in the Palmer apartments.
So my only point
I don't know if that's indicative. There's a couple of other ones that have opened up since the study, so I'm going to have them go back and check those as well.
We're going to look at all of those to see how close we are, but my only point was that's the one that caught my eye, that they said, you're not going to get very many kids out of these apartments because they're kind of high-end and the experience and so forth and so on. And I said, I don't know about that. So we are going to take a look at that. But if that's even close to being indicative, with new housing coming on, we're concerned.
So just to follow up, Mr. Copeland and Mr. Ghanaian, so then do we have a sense, I know there's several new developments that are in process, so do we have a sense then of what those are and what the impact might be in addition to what our current projections are? Because obviously those projections don't include anything that has come up since April 16 when, well, was it April 16 or April 15? I'm trying to remember
It
when
was
the last
last
enrollments-
April. Last April was actually, the
There was just an update
the
in
major
April.
one was done last April. What he's quoting was April statistics. What they did this past fall was really look at just the overall school enrollment. One of the things that the board has approved is for us to really triangulate this data, go with both Montgomery County Planning Commission and another independent to see if we can get even more triangulation. What both of them will do is take this new information from these houses and they'll probably recalculate their multipliers to determine what they think increased housing would be. My only point was to indicate that, the best laid plans and prognostications, people will do what people will do. And one of the things that concerns me is, some of those apartment buildings are, the newer ones may be more expensive, but in comparison to Center City rates, they're comparable, and they have, what goes along with them is the Lower Merion schools. So I think people may be willing to spend that to leave Center City to come into the community. I think Radnor's experiencing some rapid growth, and there are a couple of others surrounding.
Okay, please.
I know we want to get to public comment. Bob, I think, I just want to clarify, if we were to do a redistricting, it's not a pure redistricting. There would be construction somewhere, be it additions onto existing at the elementary level, at existing elementary schools or a new elementary school. Short answer, we cannot just redistrict our way out of this enrollment growth. Is that correct?
Well, one of the questions that was asked was, because Penn Win has got the growth, there was concern about the size of Penn Win. So if you redistrict from Penn Win into other schools, you still haven't done anything about Gladwin. That's still going to be a school of over 800, and there's no where to really redistrict them because Kinwood, Belmont, Hills, and anyone nearby is also getting a large. So you'd have to build on to those. My only point was if you wanted to get away from a large Penn Win, you could do it, but that's not going to stop you from getting large other elementary schools.
But those would require construction.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's my
Absolutely.
point.
Yes.
At this moment in time, we're not seeing any way to avoid construction at the elementary level totally. That's not what we're seeing at this moment.
Unless you put the 5th grade in the middle school,
Okay, thanks.
which was,
Okay,
let's
so
go on
after-
record, that wasn't my suggestion.
Is there anybody else that hasn't asked a question at the board table that would like to? Okay, we'll have Diane ask her question, and then we'll move to public comment.
Again, Pat, can you pull up the slide with the number of students in Ardmore? Yeah, right there. Okay, so you see there's Penn Valley, 249. Okay, and now pull up towards the end of the presentation where you have the map with the 660 Williamson. I wasn't going to ask this question because I kind of thought the whole new school thing really wasn't a factor, but maybe it is, so I'll throw it out there. While, yes, it's very clear that that building is not where the density of the students are, there's 2 schools that are having significant growth problems. Gladwin is one, and that's right smack in the middle of Gladwin, and Penn Win. And so it could be possible to take relieve a big chunk from Gladwin, relieve a big chunk from Penn Valley, and then move some of Penn Win to Penn Valley. So it's possible, and then we wouldn't have the 550 limitation. We wouldn't need the parking garage, but we'd need to buy the property, so it's probably similar cost. But I just ask that we not throw this out just because that property is in Gladwin, because it could relieve some pressure from what we have and solve some problems.
Okay, so with that, Ms. LaPera, would you please call folks up for public comment? When you come to the microphone, if you could give us your name, general vicinity of where you live in the district, and we are going to limit it to a 3-minute time limit so that folks who want to speak will have an opportunity. Thank you.
Cheryl Masterman, Leanne Shore, Sharon Weinstein, and Tanea Schreiber.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Masterman. I live in Villanova. I'm just finishing up at Gladwin, so I've had experience with the Gladwin expansion project that was just recently completed. And my point was just actually probably would dovetail on the idea of trying to, as Mr. Copeland said, it doesn't necessarily have to be an and or, it can be several things. So if we piggyback on Diane's idea of building, if we still need modulars in some places, that's a possibility. And I just wanted to say that our experience with the modulars at Gladwin, in my opinion, was very positive. The kids that were in the modulars, one of my children was in there, actually really liked them. It was quieter, and in a school like Gladwin, which was extremely crowded and still is, it was a nice, quiet place to go to, and it felt more like a serious education instead of a place where you felt like there was just noise all around you all the time. The one negative, however, was that the surrounding community had a big problem with them and wanted them out like toot sweet, as you might remember. So when we look at adding modulars, I think that the message I'm trying to send is we've got to be very careful to position it to the community in a positive message, that this would be, that you would be being good stewards of their tax dollars rather than spending it on a large building or adding on to many different buildings. So I do feel that with Gladwin, and I'm trying to remember who else did Welsh Valley, doing new expansions just recently, that taxpayers are not going to be happy if you're saying, well, I want to start adding on to Gladwin again. I understand we didn't get what we wanted the first time around and we should have added more onto them to begin with, but they didn't believe us. So here we are in the same boat. But I just think modulars aren't necessarily a bad thing. And if they stay for longer and we can get the community to agree to it, then that might be an excellent opportunity for us. And hopefully helping to receive or retain our green spaces as much as possible as well, because I think that's a big concern with all of these expansions, is that the kids are going to lose playground space. And I think the playground space is really, really important, especially when you're super crowded. We've had that experience in Gladwin where there's just nowhere to go play. Then being crowded and on top of no green space is a bad situation. Thanks.
Next speaker, please.
Leanne Shore.
Hi, my name is Leanne Shore. I am a pediatric registered nurse from Penwyn. And I came up here actually with quite a few questions, but now that we have been discussing this space in Gladwin, you know, I've really been leaning towards option 2A that we've discussed about with building at Penwyn. And I am definitely for this option of possibly investigating acquiring this property and doing a graduated radiating rollout of redistricting. There have been several studies published in many journals, one of which the Academy of Pediatrics did a case study on recess and timing of recess. When you have overcrowded schools, you can't get kids out on recess. When you don't have available green space, you can't get kids out to have a decent amount of time at recess. The Academy of Pediatrics did a study where they showed that behavior changed with recess greater than 15 minutes. That is what our kids at Penguin get right now. And I know I've been up here before and said that when they are not on their green space, they are not allowed to kick a ball, they are not allowed to run, and they are not allowed to throw a ball. That is not quality recess. And I agree we need to keep in mind that we need to have green space for these kids. And adding on to Penguin, we're at the bottom barrel already of green space. Adding on to Penguin is going to further minimize the space that the kids have already. The one question I did have, though, I have several, is whenever you calculate your bumps of enrollment, when do you do that? You know, being someone who has traveled and has lived in Dallas, Texas, and in Pittsburgh, residents, fellows, and new physicians sometimes do not come into their communities until July or August. So do you have bumps and increases then? We are a very academic community. When do your bumps, when are they calculated, and when do you figure that out? Also, the other question and statement I would have first in question is, when do you, are you accounting with these numbers when you talk about fifth grade for the future, the kids we have in classes younger than the current fifth grade? Because I can tell you right now we have 5 fifth grades, I believe, at Penguin. My daughter has reported they have had, I believe, almost 9 or more new enrollees in the past month to month and a half at Penguin. So they've already bumped up to more kids in a class. Also, I believe her grade is the last grade of 5 fifth grade classrooms. After that, a majority of all the grades behind her year are 6 classes. Some, it sounds like, could actually even bump to 7 next year if they get more enrollees. And I guess also the question would be, how many enrollees do you have at the Green Hill Apartments? Because I know you investigated the Palmer. But how many Penguin students do we have at Green Hill as well? And will that be bumping up because there is an increase of sales at the Green Hill currently? Thank you.
So thank you for the questions. Given our time constraints, what I'm going to ask is if, I know Mr. Young has taken notes, and we typically try to answer as many questions as we can in the time allotted. However, if there, can you respond to that kind of briefly, Bob? I know that's tough, but in terms of the enrollment numbers, et cetera. But we're not going to be able to answer every single question tonight. But again, this is an ongoing dialogue, so I want folks to understand that this is the last time we'll have this conversation. But I do want folks to have an opportunity to come to the microphone and speak.
So the enrollment numbers, you can really begin to take those numbers almost at any time because you're looking at historical data. I've always taken enrollment numbers within the first month of the school year because, you know, and if you do that consistently, generally speaking, you get good numbers. The problem is that in Lower Merion, there's not been a consistency. One year it's up, one year it's down, and that's one of the troubling aspects.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Sharon Weinstein. I live in Penguin. I'm wondering if the most current demographers report can be posted on the school district website.
Everything is on the website. If you go
The
to
most current demographers report is not. It's from
April
last,
16th,
from just
Doug,
2015.
Is that not on? That's the most
So
current.
the numbers that you're telling us from the demographers, that's not in the report, or?
Okay, so the
Yes.
full demographers report was April 16th. What was done in October was an update based on that.
Could that get posted?
So those numbers, in essence, are, because that was part of the presentations that we've given, so they are there. Yeah,
I
they're
haven't,
in.
Okay, whoever is at the mic has the floor. We'll do our best to answer questions. If there's information that we have available, we'll make sure it's posted.
Okay, yeah, if it could be in a clear place of the update, that would be helpful, because going through the previous presentations. And I hope that this one will be online tomorrow. Thanks.
What's the time frame of posting? We have to edit the presentations. I just want to give folks some clarification here. This doesn't happen in real time, I'm gonna be honest with you. So we have folks who work, diligently to get this work done. Ms. LaPera, please.
The presentations are flipped into the public content of the board agendas the following day.
Oh,
So you should be able to go back into any facilities purchasing meeting, a presentation that was given, or one of our board meetings that is held on Monday nights, the day after the meeting, and you should be able to see every one of the presentations that have been there, because I do that myself.
Terrific.
Okay.
So I guess just finish with the request for some consolidated demographer updates. Thanks.
Next speaker, and if I could get folks, Denise, could you just call maybe 3 or 4 folks?
I did. So
Okay, great.
after,
If you
after
could
this
be at
speaker,
the
Ms.
mic
Schreiber,
prepared
we
to
have David
speak.
Park and Stephen Sachs. And if anybody else would like to sign in, please do so now.
Hi, my name's Tanya Schreiber. I'm from Penwyn, and based on the report from last April, it said that we would cap out at 723 kids, but we've heard over the last few months that you're expecting 850 kids. We've also heard that you're expecting upwards of a 30% increase on 723 kids. So 723 kids plus 30% within 5 years means you're expecting 1,000 kids. You don't need 6 more classrooms, you need 10 more classrooms, meaning when you're done with the expansion, no matter where it is, you're going to need to keep the trailers. So that's why we keep asking why you're so committed to neighborhood stabilization if it locks Penwyn into having over 1,000 kids in that building. Now, I've heard when it comes to where we can build, one of the questions we haven't gotten is everyone says wait and see is how long does it take? How long would it take to act on these? How long would it take to expand? I'm guessing 3 years. If you want to build a 7th school, how long would that take? Is it 7 years? 12? Because we keep talking about how much we need in the next 5 years, in the next 10, in the next 15, without telling us how long it's going to take to build a new school. Those numbers really don't get us anything except more trailers. And the third thing is, I was wondering, when it comes to Marion Elementary, I completely understand the traffic there. When it comes to elementary, it's going to be very challenging to send more kids there. But it was refreshing to see, and I appreciate Packenham has really been very helpful about getting us a lot of information and doing a lot of number crunching. And one of the things he talked about was how one of the middle schools, Balakin, was able to share land with an elementary. And by doing that, by having a middle school and elementary in the same lot, they're able to share the land, but also reduce the amount of traffic impact on both because the kids come and go at different times. So I invite you to look at whether Marion Elementary, which has triple the amount of space per child, if we can address this entire population issue by creating a 3rd middle school that's in a walk zone that would allow us to have the flexibility to possibly bump 5th grade into a middle school. We don't have to buy more land. We don't have to do anything else except whatever the plan is, 7 years out, have a 3rd middle school in a walkable area and have 2 elementary schools feed into each of the middle schools. When it comes to a magnet school, I think it's a great idea, and just wanted to let everybody remind them that there actually is a 4th bus loop that collects kids for all the private schools. So if there is an opportunity to build, again, on Marion or anywhere else, St. Justin's property, a school that would be able to collect children, there already is a bus loop that collects children, puts them at hubs, and then spokes them out. So the magnet school could be used for that. And again, I would appreciate repeating what they said, that getting us the information that you guys are using that shows us how 30% within 15 years gets us to 850 kids, we would really appreciate that information. Thank you very much.
Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm David Park. I live in Penwyn. First, I want to say thank you because I checked today, and the Penwyn website has been updated with all the minutes up through May 12th, so I really appreciate that. I look forward to being able to read these a little more leisurely because we went through them pretty quickly tonight. I think there's been some discussion, Diane brought up about what about a different site. I would certainly support more exploration in that area. Also, there was some discussion about modulars that, we don't really know. Is the Philadelphia School District, with the influx of lots of external people, actually going to turn around to the point that they don't have to come to Penwyn anymore? I really feel for you. It's impossible to be able to tell what's going to happen. But I was just wondering if there's an option other than modulars to look at renting a site that might already be existing as an alternative to using modulars if we really don't know what the growth pattern is going to look like. The retention basin, I've talked about trees before. I really value my trees because I live across from those and lost one already. So I kind of have a question of, are we going to lose the remaining trees if we put the retention basin in the parking lot, especially because it's on the side of the parking lot right by the trees. So that's a question I have. As far as space calculation, I was kind of wondering if the kindergarten playground was counted as hard space at Penn Win. Because I know a lot of people have talked about it's like their kids are told that they're not allowed to run at recess, but basically the kindergarten playground I don't think really gets used because it's not hard space. It's actually like squishy carpet. So I don't know how that was counted. I kind of agree with Dr. Copeland. When I suggested looking at moving fifth graders, so you can blame me, because I remember asking that question, I did not know exactly how things were distributed. What I thought was that the school district had a junior high and a middle school, which is what I grew up with, and which I think works a lot better. So it's 5th and 6th is middle school, and junior high is 7th and 8th. And it does spread things out a little bit more. So as you're really looking at options and looking at sites, that might give you more that you could think about as well. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Good evening, Stephen Sachs, and I live at 282 Trent Road. Usually I have concerns and issues. Tonight I don't. I have a little different agenda. I really liked the amount of information that was presented tonight. It shows how much effort and thought you guys put forth to gather this information to give to us. A job well done. I'd also like to thank Pat over there who, Sunday he's hard at work, you know, behind the scenes, checking on things, making sure that everything is proper. And as a result, we did come to find that the parking lot area versus the front turns out to be a better option. So I like that you're listening to us in terms of trying to maintain at least what we have and look at the options. And perhaps some of them are a little bit more expensive. So I appreciate the effort and the time that everybody's put in there. So the only question I have, the Williamson Road in Gladwin, how big a parcel is that? Does anybody know? How big is it?
It's about 13 acres.
And didn't we really need 20 acres or no? Or 13 acres is sufficient?
Pat, do you have a response? Can we let Pat respond? Do you have a response to that? Just quickly, I'm sorry.
I've got to go up here.
Sure.
I don't think we can answer that question. We haven't had a
Okay.
time to really analyze what we could do with that amount. If
Okay,
you were,
that's fair.
if you were building a new school and you were out in the prairie someplace, you'd probably try to get more land than that, but.
And the distance from the Penguin area? I'm sorry. The distance from the Penguin area to that Williamson Road location, how far is that? And not necessarily as the crow flies, but driving it?
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that.
Okay,
right
so
Okay.
that is certainly something that is within the range of options that we're considering.
Oh, yeah,
So we'll continue to have that dialogue. I just want
I
to
see
make sure
that.
we can respond. Everyone has an opportunity to speak
No,
to
no.
Zach. So
Just one last thing, and I don't know that you can address this or not, or perhaps suggest this to the proper people. We all talked about, and I didn't hear any talk about the safety and the traffic and so on and so forth. One small adjustment sometimes can make a big difference. There is a complete bottleneck on Trent Road when the buses are leaving and when the parents are leaving. They come from opposite directions and the street is just not large enough to accommodate a bus and a car at the same time. But there is a solution to that, and it will increase the flow for the parents, and I don't think jeopardize the bus or the safety of any of the children. The buses exit the school on the Drayton side. They drive up to Trent Road. They make a right-hand turn on Trent Road, and then they make a right-hand turn on Haverford, onto Remington to Haverford. If they exited the school directly down Rock Glen Road, which is where they exit, the bus exits, 2.5 blocks down is Manoa. There's a light there. The buses can turn safely. 1 block is Haverford, one block is Haverford. So if you just simply reroute those buses slightly, it will alleviate a big bottleneck and the flow will be much better. Again, not necessarily your department, but if you could speak to the proper authorities, I'd appreciate that, and I think it would work.
He's right behind you.
Well,
he
I'll
will
presume he
certainly
heard
consider
me.
it.
I
Yes.
guess he heard me.
No, I
That's
remember you
again.
suggested that earlier.
I did suggest it. I really think it's something to at least take a look at. I truly do. And again, I truly appreciate the effort as a member of the community, and thank you all.
Thank you very much. Next speaker,
Mr.
please.
Meyer?
Hello, my name is Ben Meyer from Penwyn. I'll just try to be pretty brief. Thank you for looking deeply into these questions, asking good questions, thinking outside the box, treating us well and with humor here tonight. Also, thank you for considering moving the drainage to the parking lot. I think that would make a huge difference. It'll pave over quickly. The field won't be disturbed more than necessary. So it would seem like a great idea and example of thinking outside the box. It also makes option 2A, which is more expensive than 1C, but it saves a few $100,000s of perhaps redigging that ditch, drainage ditch, because that water can then be routed there pretty easily if needed. Although it doesn't really take, option 2A doesn't really take up much more any green space. Well, the front of the school, I guess. So anyway, it's a good thing because it saves money, and that's always good. I thought there was a little bit dismissive of the size of elementary schools. It was about 15 years ago, but this National Center for Education Statistics, 800 is way, way above the national average. Alabama, back 15 years ago, 467, the average size of elementary school. New Jersey, 448. Ohio, 397. So, I think that's in favor of looking for a 7th elementary school site, and as well as the costs, because it does give you, as was pointed out, a lot more flexibility. The one slide, I have to say, also was a bit confusing regarding the cost, the total cost. And I know you put together a huge, complicated presentation, but at least with the Penwyn one, that only adds 150 student capacity to enrollment to the one school, plus the gymnasium, of course. So per student, which a lot of times you have put those costs on your slide, the per student cost of Penwyn Elementary School is probably relatively high compared to building a new elementary school, because with the land that's already owned, it's 550 students. Really quick question. We've tried to investigate this, but we don't know, revealing our ignorance here, but I heard Pennsylvania pays 30% for new construction. Is this true? Does this, again, we don't know, but we read this somewhere. Does that count for additions as well, and does that include land? So it might be question to ask. I'm sorry, I don't know. Probably some experts know here. So again, thank you for thinking outside the box.
Thank you. I just want to add a piece in terms of, to Mr. Meyer's point and Mr. Sachs' point. During facilities, when the options were presented around the basin, the facilities committee was at question, is this the best way to do it? So I want to, give some credit to the board and the committee of raising some of those questions before the community came and said, well, wait a minute, we have some concerns. So we have the same concerns. We're your neighbors, we're your school board. So I don't want it to seem as though, we aren't raising some of those same concerns in terms of quality of life issues as well. Next speaker, please. Thank you.
That's it.
Oh, wait, there's one.
Oh, sorry.
So if there are other folks that want to speak, we have about 10 more minutes that we've allocated for public comment. Please sign in with Ms. LaPera, and then we're going to close the list. So I'll just take a couple seconds to let folks come up if they'd like.
Hello, everyone. Okay. My name is Nigeria James, and I'm a Penwyn parent. I live on Green Hill Lane. And I just wanted to make sure that I shared my concern. I moved here from Los Angeles intentionally with very methodically about how we selected a school. And we chose and came upon Penwyn and Lower Merion, Penwyn specifically because of the diversity. And I'm very grateful that in the last year, because of some of the issues that we've had at Penguin, the administration has become more aware of the importance of cultural proficiency. And I'm not sure, and I'm not familiar with the other schools, I am concerned of the area that the population that may be considered for redistricting, and how that might impact Penguin, how it might impact my children. And I just want to make sure that we're aware of is just not placing children in certain environments and think that they can thrive. There has to be culturally proficient environments where all kids are considered and everyone feels comfortable and welcomed. And so I just want to make sure that when you think about redistricting, I'm hoping that that will be the last option. Think about some of those concerns that parents who have come here, who live in the area, who may not be as vocal, that their concerns are very valid in terms of how their children feel in these environments. And I don't want that to be lost because in my own experience, I know that there is a need for cultural proficiency in Lower Merion, and I want to make sure that we take those children into consideration. I don't envy you at all with the choices that you have to make, so I do appreciate the time that you're taking to look at all options and to hear us as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, we have a couple more minutes left for public comment. No more speakers? Okay, so I'm sorry? I'm going to give you a break. Give me a moment. Okay, please. And so we'll have a moment for Mr. Copeland
Yeah, I
to speak,
just
and then you
took
can
a
have
look
your
at
break.
some numbers. One of the things that I wanted to remind folks of when we look at demographics, what a demographer is going to do is they're first going to look at what the live birth numbers are in a community, and then what's called a live birth cohort survival. How many of those students actually end up showing up in the school? And while that's not perfect, and while Lower Merion's numbers have exceeded that, it's not that they don't matter. Our highest projected enrollments don't continue just seeing 30% increases over time compounded. So we do have a highest projected enrollment. One of the things that we'll do is each October, we'll take a look and see how many kids actually registered and what the new live birth projection is. We wouldn't just say, well, we've had X percentage increase in the past, so that we're going to see that naturally continue in the future. Question was asked about the length of time it takes to build a school. Obviously, the answer is, and to some degree, is it's going to depend. It's going to depend on the size of the school. A fast-moving school, I would argue, 18 months. I'm looking at the architects. They're shaking. So generally,
it depends.
Generally, well, he's going to say it depends on the construction manager, and the construction manager is going to say it's the. But my experience is about 18 months. So.
Okay. Thank you. So we have a transition between now and our next meeting, and we need to switch videotapes as well. So we're going to take 10. Oh, I'm sorry. This meeting is now adjourned. We do have a transition between now and the next meeting. Again, thank you for coming. This is an ongoing dialogue, so we'll look forward to your comments. I'm sorry, was there a website that, is it Capital Comments at Lmsb? Is that the email address? So if folks have additional questions that they didn't get to ask, capitalcomments@lmsd.org, please send those along so we can take a look. Thank you. So 10 minutes.